أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله.
بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. ثم أما بعد. Continuing on with the Meccan period of the Seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We mentioned last week some of the occurrences. We could say approximately midway through the Meccan period. We said the Meccan period is 13 years, and we spoke up to what occurred around the 6th to 7th year of the revelation sent to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we're around that halfway point. However, it gets a little bit quicker. Very soon, not this lesson, but next lesson, we'll probably start speaking about some of the things related to what occurred in order for the migration to Medina to happen. So my intention, inshallah, is we go through today's lesson, and then next week we go through some of the final points, like the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam going to Taif and things like that, and then we'll do the lesson after that, which would be the final lesson before Ramadan, a big revision lesson, and then after Ramadan we'll start to working towards the Medini period, inshallah. That's my intention. Hopefully it works that way. So we said last week we spoke about the second migration to Abyssinia, Ethiopia. We spoke about the reaction of Quraysh to the migration of the Prophet, of the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We spoke about the conversion of two of the great companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the uncle of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Hamza, and the beloved companion of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu. After the conversion of Umar and of Hamza, obviously there was a bit of a turn in the situation of the Muslims in Mecca. Like we said, this was a big mark against Quraysh, and this was a big hit against Quraysh, and it really affected Quraysh, because now you have not just people of wealth, because already we said some wealthy people had entered, such as Abu Bakr, such as Uthman, such as Abdurrahman ibn Auf, and those others. Some wealthy people had entered, and people of status had entered. But now you're starting to get people that are revered inside of Mecca, and people that are somewhat feared inside of Mecca. People were intimidated by Umar, people were intimidated by Hamza. These are now mighty strong men who are now entering into Islam, giving the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam a backing, a physical and powerful backing. And Umar radiallahu ta'ala, firstly, Hamza, like we said, he's one of the children of who? Abdul Muttalib. But this is now, again, and Abdul Muttalib in Quraysh is like obviously he's passed away by this stage, but he's like the name, the big name that's existed in their lifetime. Abdul Muttalib was involved in everything and so much in the situation that occurred with Abraham, the destroying of the Kaaba, with the rediscovering and the finding of Zamzam. We didn't speak about that story, but maybe it's something that we can do in a separate lesson. Abdul Muttalib is someone that is revered, and now one of his sons, first and foremost, and one of his elder sons, and one of his strong sons, Hamza, someone that's known for hunting and known for his abilities, has entered into Islam. So this now it affects Quraysh. And then Umar, they saw Umar as a future chief of Mecca, someone that can be a leader, because not only was Umar strong, Umar was strong, but Umar was super intelligent. We know it through Islam, we know it through the Islamic standpoint, and we mentioned that I think in the khutbah. Who was Umar? Umar was someone that was so wise that he would constantly be thinking about what was good for the ummah, and then he would give his advice, because Umar, as we know, he's jari, he's confident. He would give his advice to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then revelation would come down afterwards agreeing with Umar. Now this is not someone just, when we say someone strong, don't just think like a brute walking around. Now this is someone that's strong, but then someone that's intellectual. And even before the sending of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, even before his Islam, Quraysh saw him that way. And they used to allow him to give his advice and allow him to give his opinion on certain matters when it was only known to be for those who were elder. So this was a big dent in the attempt of Quraysh to suppress Islam. So they start to panic. Quraysh starts to panic at this stage. As we mentioned, they tried the physical route and they tried the mocking route, and we'll see that they try it again. But now they're starting to think, what can we do? One of the things that's left for them is, let's go and negotiate with Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam ourselves. Let's see what we can offer him. Because right now there's no offer. Right now they haven't offered to give him anything. They're just trying to stop him. Either stop and go back to your ways, or we're going to stop you physically. But when that's not possible, because you have Abu Talib that's not giving him up, and now you have the strong entering into Islam, now we need to try and find another route. So they go to the extent now that they're going to negotiate with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So they choose from amongst them one of their chiefs, known as Utbah bin Rabi'ah, one of the elders in the community of Quraysh, to go to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and propose some things to him to see if he would be willing to stop his kufr. He goes to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he says, "Oh my nephew, you are a man who holds an important family position amongst us with noble lineage. Yet you come to your people with a grave matter that separates their groups. You have outraged our gods and religion and accused our forefathers and wise men of impiety and error and created strife amongst us. So listen to my proposal for you to consider, and perhaps you will accept one of them." So the Prophet ﷺ, he says, speak. And he gives him the opportunity, make your proposals. What is it going to be? Make your proposals. So Utbah, he says, "Oh nephew, if you're doing all of this with the view of getting wealth, we will join together to give you greater riches than any member of Quraysh has ever possessed. You're doing it for money, we'll give you more money than anyone. If ambition moves you, meaning you're just striving to be great, if ambition moves you, we will make you our chief, and he will make you the head of all of Quraysh. If you desire kingship, we will readily offer you that. You want to be a king, we'll call you a king. If you are under the power of an evil spirit, if this is some type of sihr that's come to you, some type of magic that has affected you, and it haunts you and dominates you that you cannot shake it off, then tell us and we'll call the most skillful physicians to come and cure you." So they're pretty much offering the Prophet ﷺ whatever he wants. And you want money, we'll give you money. You want to be the chief, we'll make you the chief. You want to be the king, we will make you the king. If you're ill in any way, we'll come and we'll get the most skillful people from not just Quraysh, but from all around the Arabian Peninsula, and we'll find them to come and to cure you. And this, what does it indicate towards? How desperate Quraysh are. Quraysh are so willing, or so desperate, that they're willing to make him the leader. If they would accept Islam, he would be the leader anyway. But just so that he stops calling towards Islam, to show you how desperate they are and how scared they are, willing to make him the leader, willing to make him the king. Do whatever it requires, give him to all of their wealth, just so that he can stop his calling towards Allah Azza wa Jal. So what does the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, "Have you said all you had to say?" So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Khalas, you done? You finished what you have to say, because now it's my turn to speak." So Utbah, he says, yes. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he starts to recite some Quran, some ayat from the Quran. He says, "Hamim tanzilun min Rahmanir Rahim," and he continues with the ayat from Surah Fussilat, and he says, "A revelation from Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful, a book where the verses are explained in detail, a Quran in Arabic for those people who know, glad tidings and warning, but most of them turn away, so they listen not, and they say, our hearts are under covering from that which you invite us to." So he recites the ayat from the Quran to Utbah, and Utbah sits and he listens attentively. And there are different narrations about how he responded and how he reacted to them. Some of them says that he placed his hands behind his head to support him from how surprised he was. And that when the Prophet ﷺ continued to read and eventually reached ayat regarding prostration, that Utbah eventually he prostrates. So the Prophet ﷺ, he says to him, Abu Walid, which is Utbah, "You have heard my reply, now you are now free to do whatever you please." Meaning you gave your offer, this was my reply, now you choose what you're going to do. You're going to accept, khair wa barakah. If you're not going to accept, then you go down. So Utbah, he goes back. In another narration, he mentions that when the Prophet ﷺ reached the ayat about them turning away after hearing the call, the Utbah stood up and he panicked and he pressed and he put his hand on the mouth of the Prophet ﷺ and he said, "I beg you to stop." And this was also from what's narrated of his reaction. So eventually Utbah, he goes back to Quraysh and those whom he met with before he came, and he goes and he tells them about the Prophet ﷺ and his attitude. So he says, "I have never heard words similar to those that he recited. They definitely relate neither to poetry nor to witchcraft." And he's not a poet and he's not doing any sihr, he's not doing any witchcraft. Nor do they derive from soothsaying. O people of Quraysh, I request you to take note of my advice and grant the man full freedom to pursue his goals. Meaning leave him. From what I heard from him, there's no point. Give him his freedom, allow him to do what he wants to do. In which case, he continues, in which case you could find safety or you could safely detach yourselves from him. Meaning, you leave him to do what you want and you'll be safe by simply detaching yourself. You're worried about what he comes with, just say, "I don't believe." And live simply and live separately. Just don't go and harm him. Don't do what you have been doing. I swear that his words bear a supreme message. Should the other Arabs rid you of him, they will spare you the trouble. On the other hand, if he gains power over the Arabs, then you will enjoy his kingship and share in his might. Meaning, it's if the Arabs do you a favor and take care of the Prophet ﷺ, they're going to save you the trouble. Meaning you don't have the ability to stop him. Pretty much what Utbah is saying is you don't have the ability to stop the Prophet ﷺ, because what I can tell from the words that he's saying is that this is something different and this is something that's special. This is something different, this is something that's special. If the other Arabs from other tribes and other cities are able to do it, they're going to save you a lot of trouble, but you're not going to be able to stop him. But if he gets power over those Arabs, then you're going to share in his kingship. Meaning what? He's going to take over you. He's going to take over you and he's going to eventually be your leader. This is what's going to eventually happen. For this is the attempt of Quraysh to what? To negotiate with the Prophet ﷺ, but obviously the negotiation fails. And Allah Azza wa Jalla says in the Quran that they wish that you will bend so that they will bend. These people have no asl to their deen. They don't have revelation, they don't have anything to go back to. They make up their religion on the spot. For them to say, you want to be the king, we'll make you the king. You want this, we'll do that. Some other narrations have mentioned, but again, I'm not sure about the authenticity of it. But this to show you what some of the historians have mentioned, that they even offered to worship 1 year and you worship 1 year. Meaning we'll interchange in our religions. You come to us for 1 year, we come to you for 1 year. To show you how desperate these people were. Obviously, their negotiation fails because the Prophet ﷺ is not doing this from his own desire, but he's doing this from what? The commandment of Allah Azza wa Jal. One of the situations that also occur, now again we're seeing the desperate attitude of Quraysh, is Abu Jahl gets so sick of the Prophet ﷺ that he goes out with the intention to kill him. He says, "I do not fear what the tribe of the Prophet ﷺ is going to do. I'm going to get this boulder, I'm going to crush the head of the Prophet ﷺ, and I'm going to end this once and for all. If a war comes, a war comes. If I have to be killed, whatever happens, I don't care. I'm going to go and I am going to end the situation of the Prophet ﷺ. So he goes and he says to the people of Quraysh, "O people of Quraysh, it seems that Muhammad is determined ﷺ, to go finding faults with our religion, degrading our forefathers, discrediting our way of life, and abusing our gods. I bear witness to our God that I will rid you of him, and I'm going to take care of him. Once and for all, I will carry a heavy rock and drop it on his head whilst he is in prostration." Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. "I am not afraid of whatever his tribe will do." And then the people that are around, they encouraged him. For them, he's going to do it anyway. And we don't like Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so we're going to encourage it anyway. For they encourage him, so he goes out. So one morning when the Prophet ﷺ goes to the Kaaba and he's making tawaf, and then eventually he's praying to Allah Azza wa Jal, Abu Jahl, he waits, and when the Prophet ﷺ starts praying and then he goes into prostration, he carries a rock and he goes to the head of the Prophet ﷺ ready to drop it on him. And he goes towards the Prophet ﷺ ready to drop it on his head. However, what happens? As soon as he approaches the Prophet ﷺ, he turns away, his face goes pale, he begins to shudder, and from how heavy the rock becomes, he drops it, and he rushes back to his tribe who was watching him what he was doing. Meaning, nothing happened. The Prophet ﷺ didn't address him. The companions didn't come and face him. An army didn't come and attack him. Simply, he was walking to the Prophet ﷺ, and then he turns around, pale face, shaking, drops the rock, and flees from the Prophet ﷺ. For the people, they go to him and they say to Abu Jahl, what occurred? What happened? You went to crush his head, you were so confident you were going to do it, and you turned back scared. So Abu Jahl, he says, when I approached, a male camel, unusual in its figure, with fearful canines, meaning its teeth, intercepted and almost devoured me. And this is something that he saw. The rest of Quraysh didn't see it. No one else could see it, or else they wouldn't have asked him what occurred. They would have seen the camel come. However, this was the image, obviously, from Allah Azza wa Jal that was sent towards Abu Jahl to protect the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and as a sign and to show the cowardness of Abu Jahl. Ibn Ishaq, he mentions in a narration that says that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he was asked about this situation, he said, it was Jibreel alayhi salam. If Abu Jahl had approached closer, he would have killed him. Meaning, if he came any closer, he would have been killed. So the Prophet ﷺ obviously was protected by Allah Azza wa Jal. However, the story tells us what? It teaches us what? The extent that Quraysh is trying to go to stop the Prophet ﷺ from continuing his call. When this failed, again, I know it's attempt after attempt, however, this keeps us on track with the Seerah. When this failed, so now you can't taunt him and stop him. You can't mock him and stop him. You can't stop the people from entering. You can't negotiate with him. Abu Talib's not going to give up on him. And we tried to kill him and we failed. And all of these steps that are going on, we can't do anything about it. So now they go to another step and another effort to stop the people from entering into Islam, and that is that they boycott. Boycott. What occurs? The disbelievers, being frustrated with the Prophet ﷺ, they meet and they agree that they are going to boycott the tribes of the Prophet ﷺ and those affiliated. So, Banu Hashim and Banu al-Muttalib. These tribes, they are going to boycotting. Meaning, what does it mean that they're going to boycott? They're going to, or they made a pledge with one another that they're not going to intermarry with them. So no one from outside of those tribes are going to marry with those tribes. They are not going to trade with them. They're not going to buy or to sell to them. They're not going to sit with them. They're not going to have any interaction, speak with them. They're not going to mix with them. They're not going to enter into their house, and they're not going to speak to them until they hand the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam over to them. This was the condition. They're going to boycott them from all of this. So pretty much any dealings with the Muslims, or any dealings, with Banu Hashim, Banu al-Muttalib, so even some of them are not Muslim, they're going to stop until what? Until they agree that they are going to hand the Prophet ﷺ over to them. This obviously causes a massive issue, because if no one's buying from them and no one's selling to them, what happens? They can't eat. And some of the narrations mention that it got so bad and that starvation was so bad that they had to resort to eating whatever they could find, even if it meant eating leaves from the trees. Eating whatever they could. And when people, to show you, when people would come from outside of Mecca to do trade, like the Syrians, people from Syria will come, people from Medina will come to do trade, the Quraysh, what would they do? They would buy everything that they had so that these tribes couldn't go and buy anything. So they were boycotted. They had nothing. So this boycott, it continues. And they even wrote it down to make it an official document, an official agreement, and they hung it inside the Kaaba. They hung it inside the Kaaba so that everyone could know about it. As we said, this affected the Muslims, and this affected the tribes a lot. They were not able to eat, and this obviously caused them a lot of strife. And this blockade, this boycott, continued for 3 years. For 3 years. So this wasn't something that was short. This is something that continued for obviously a very long time. 3 years of no one buying and selling for you. This has caused illnesses, and this has caused a lot of effects. Some of the people inside of Mecca, some of the people of Quraysh, they became upset with the situation because they started to think about it as though these are still our kinspeople. These are still our family. These are still people that we've dealt with, and we're boycotting them and we're harming them when realistically they haven't done anything physical to us. So some of them start to get together and they start to speak about how we should go about stopping it. From them include people from the likes of Hisham bin Amr, and he was someone that used to the best of his ability, he would go out of his way to smuggle some food to these tribes and these people that were boycotted during the night. However, there was only so much that he could do. Also, Zuhair bin Abi Umayyah al-Makhzumi, he was also from those from Quraysh who were upset with the situation that was occurring. For what did they do? They agreed that they would try to put some pressure, and others from Quraysh, they will try to put some pressure upon the chiefs of Quraysh that agreed to this boycott to get them to stop it. So they agreed that what they will do is one day they will go to the Kaaba and they would start to bring it up. You could say they'll start to bring it up. And the way they did it was actually very smart. They made it so that, or they tried to make it so that it wasn't something that was agreed upon, just something that was spontaneous. Because if they all go together and say, listen, we got to stop this, then it becomes obvious that they've been speaking, and it becomes obvious that they planned this, and this can cause issue. So what did they do? People like Hisham and people like Zuhair, and people, the other of Quraysh who agreed to it, they went to the Kaaba and they brought it up one by one. One of them said, maybe we should stop this boycott, for example. Or isn't it wrong that we're doing this boycott? And then another of them would come in and say, you know what, I agree, this is wrong. So it looks like it just came up randomly, and it looks like what? That a lot of people are agreeing to it. A lot of people are coming in, and a lot of people are agreeing to it. So Abu Jahl was from those who were amongst them, and he became upset. Obviously, he doesn't want the boycott to stop. So he starts to rebuttal them. And eventually he says that this is clearly something that you guys have planned. And this isn't something that's random. You guys have planned it. However, they continue and they continue to argue about it until eventually Abu Talib, he comes to the Kaaba where they're arguing, and he says to them that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam has came and informed me that he received revelation that the parchment, the document in which you've hung inside the Kaaba, that it's been destroyed. It's been destroyed. And some of the narrations said that it's been eaten by ants. But something has come and it has destroyed it. So he gives them an offer. He says, if you go in and you find that that what he revealed is correct, how is he going to know? He can't go in and he's not going to go in and see it. But how's he going to know? If you go in and you see that this is correct, then you give up the boycott. You give up the blockade. But if you go in and it turns out that he was not telling the truth, then I will give up Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Khalas, I'll give up, and then your entire issues will be solved. So they agree. So they go, they look inside the Kaaba, and then what do they find? They find that the parchment has been destroyed, and in agreement to what they agreed upon, they give up the blockade. They give up this blockade, and they eventually that which they were boycotted from, they were able to go back to it after 3 years. Tamam, we'll mention one more thing, inshallah, and then we'll stop, and then we'll continue next week up until where we get close to the people from Medina coming and hearing about Islam. Another attempt of Quraysh. I know we're mentioning him a lot, but another attempt of Quraysh. After this boycott, obviously Quraysh is still upset. It didn't make them happy. And even though the signs that came to them, that came to Abu Jahl with the camel, and that came to them about the parchment inside the Kaaba, they still have hatred in their heart and they don't believe. They're still upset. They're still upset and they don't believe. this now brings us close to where Abu Talib starts to get ill. And Abu Talib's illness and he got closest to his death because of, after the will of Allah Azza wa Jal and that which was written for him, because of the situation of the boycott. This affected him as well, physically and emotionally. Affected him physically and emotionally. And this is something that was concerning to Abu Talib, that his time was going to come and that his nephew was still was still not in agreement with Quraysh, or Quraysh was still not in agreement, and there's still this problem. And he, as the main protector of his nephew, was going to pass away, and he was not going to be able to be around to protect him. So what do? They gather, some of the narrations mention 25 of the noble chiefs of Mecca to have a conversation. From amongst them are, like we mentioned, Utbah bin Rabi'ah and Shaybah bin Rabi'ah and Abu Jahl and Umayyah bin Khalaf and Abu Sufyan and others from Quraysh to come and to speak with Abu Talib and to speak with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So they attend, and Abu Talib asks for his nephew to come and for them to have a conversation. So he says, Abu Talib, he says, "My nephew, here are the nobles among your people. They have proposed this meeting to submit a policy of mutual concessions and peaceful coexistence." Meaning they've come and they want to be able to live together in goodness. So the Prophet ﷺ, he says, "I will guide you to the means by which you will gain control over both the Arabs and the non-Arabs." And another narration, it says, "O uncle," he says, ﷺ, "O uncle, why don't you call them to something better?" And then Abu Talib asks, "What is that you invite them to?" The Prophet ﷺ says, "I invite them to hold fast to a message that is bound to give them access to kingship," meaning being in control, "over the Arabs and the non-Arabs." Meaning accept Islam and you will be people as Muslims that are going to make you at a higher level than the Arabs of the disbelievers and the non-Arabs. So accept Islam. You want power, you love position, you love authority. All you have to do is accept Islam. So those from the chiefs that were there, they were surprised from the response of the Prophet ﷺ, and they even said, almost in a mocking sense, and it's mentioned that Abu Jahl said this, the Prophet ﷺ in another narration, he says, "I will guide them to a word in which they say that if they say it will give them authority over the Arabs and the non-Arabs." So they became shocked and they said, like almost mockingly, "What is this word?" Abu Jahl said, "What is this word that we can say that's going to give us power over the Arabs and the non-Arabs?" So the Prophet ﷺ, he says, "I want you to testify that there is no deity worthy of worship but Allah, and then disassociate yourselves from any sort of worship you harbor for any deities other than Allah." Meaning pretty much say the Shahada. Become Muslim. Say La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. You say these words, you're going to have superiority over the Arabs and the non-Arabs, and you're going to be greater to them than them. And it's going to give you superiority in this world, it's going to give you superiority in the next world. When they heard this, they mocked the Prophet ﷺ. They said, "How can you expect us to combine all of our gods into one? You want us to combine all of our gods into one? This is something that is unimaginable. This is something that is shocking." And then they said on their way out amongst each other, "By Allah, this man will never give up, nor will he offer any concessions." I mean, he's not going to give up and he's not going to negotiate. Let us hold fast to the religion of our forefathers, and Allah will in due course deliver His judgment and settle the dispute between us and Him. Meaning, khalas, the only option that we have is let Him do what He does and we'll do what we do, and then Allah Azza wa Jal is eventually going to decide what is going to occur. And it's mentioned that Allah Azza wa Jal, through this or after this situation, He brought down some of the ayat that are mentioned in the Quran, where Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, Sad, and then He mentions the miracles of the Quran, and then He brings upon ayat speaking about the arrogance and the pride of the disbelievers and how they, how many generations that came before them in which destroyed them, that these ayat were mentioned and revealed after this situation. Inshallah, we'll stop there. Next week we'll speak about the year of grief, where the Prophet ﷺ's uncle Abu Talib passed away and his wife Khadija passed away, and then we'll speak about the Prophet's journey outside of Mecca for the first time to court, to Taif, and then we'll stop there next week, and then we'll do a revision lesson, and then Ramadan, if we meet Ramadan, Allahumma ballighna Ramadan, and then next after Ramadan we'll pretty much be very close into the Madani period. هذا والله أعلم وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وجزاكم الله خيرا والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله.